soccer with the senior people, all set.
So Mike Clifford, I told him he should play.
Yeah.
Okay. It's January 19th, 2023. The Halliwell Review Committee is now in session. So first item on the agenda is roll call. Mr. Halliwell?
Here.
Mr. Mayo?
Here.
Ms. Chartier? Here. Mr. Nigerian? Here. Mr. Savini?
Here.
Mr. Simpkins? Here. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Anybody in the audience that wants to come up and say anything?
I think my hat wants to say something.
Feel free to come up, state your name, your address. Anyone? Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is a review and approval of the draft meeting minutes from October 20th, 2022. Give everybody a moment to look those over.
I make a motion to approve.
So motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Next on the agenda, nomination and voting on chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary. Before I entertain any nominations, I would just like to take a moment to refresh everybody on our backgrounds, why we're here, kind of reintroduce ourselves. So if everybody wouldn't mind just taking a minute just to say your name, your background, and reasons you're here, I'd be happy to hear them. I will start. I will be happy to start, and I will it will be the icebreaker for our new committee here, or relatively new. Again, my name is Jeff Porter. I'm a registered architect in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. I've been doing this for the past 15 years. I'm familiar with both private and public bid work. The reason I'm here is because I want to, contribute positively to the town. We have some great property that's down at Halliwell. I went there as a student. My great-grandfather was on the school committee when the building was built. He resigned in protest over it because it was a stick-built building, saying that a California-style school is not appropriate for Northern Rhode Island. So I feel like I am somewhat closing the loop for my great-grandfather on this. But again, more so that I see tremendous opportunity down at the Halliwell property and want to make sure that this town gets what it rightfully deserves and can contribute positively to the town and help out where I can. So given my background as an architect as well. So, anybody else next?
Sure.
Okay.
Frank Halliwell, lifelong resident of town. I can echo a lot of the same sentiment you just said about the property. Obviously, same last name. My family has connection to that property. Harry was my grandfather's brother, died at the age of 32. He was the town doctor. If you talk to Claire O'Hara, she'll tell you about how he came to her house, gave her the polio vaccine. 3 hours later, you might be done that story, but same thing, want to make sure that, or see that property is used for the best interest of the town. I went there, my grandmother taught there, all my parents, my aunts and uncles went there. I have no background in architecture or planning. I work in finance. But again, just wanted to make sure it's used in the best interest of the town for everybody.
Great, thanks, Frank.
Bob Mayo, I lived in town for 48 years. I've been involved in the community, been on the sewer commission. I was very involved with the scouting program, active in my church. My 3 children went to Halliwell. My grandchildren went to Halliwell. Looking forward to just help out in any way I can for the town's activity.
Thank you. Chartier?
I'm Lori Chartier. I'm a new person in town, I guess, considering all you guys have been here forever. But this is my home forever now. I will never leave. This is wonderful. I love it, and it's pretty quintessentially great, I think. I don't know about Halliwell other than my kids were the last class that left, and I love the property. I love construction and renovation, and I think everything deserves a second chance, so and I like positive change, so that's what I'm here to do.
Thank you. Mr. Najarian?
Robert Najarian, not a lifelong. I've been here about 18 years when I married my wife, who is lifelong. I'm self-employed, run my own company, construction management, so I've been in this world of construction and design for 40-odd years. I'm the chairman of the zoning board. I serve on that committee for the last 7 years. I had volunteered, I think, in part for that reason, but also because of the common link between building and construction and the opportunity to try to come up with a creative solution to always an interesting problem for a town when it decommissions something like this school on the property that it's on, and the challenge to try to find something that fills one of the many needs within the town. So it's a pleasure to try to do that with all of you.
My name is Scott Savigny. I am been a resident since 2007 when we moved here. My son was part of the last class at Halliwell. I'm a 22-year employee in the city of Cranston, 20 years in recreation, former president of recreation, the Rhode Island Recreation and Parks Association, currently sitting on the RRRC, which oversees open space grants for DEM. So I think I wanted to get on here and offer my expertise on the recreation side, because it's not often that a community has a property of this size that can offer a large amount of recreation space, both passive and active. So I think it's important that we take advantage of that and really make something great there for the residents of of North Smithfield, because this is going to be a really good opportunity to make something that will last generations and really be treasured there.
Chris Simpkins. I've been in town for almost 8 years. Which, how long have you been here? I might be the newbie? Okay, all right. Well, we've got a couple open seats here, so maybe someone else will join that's a little bit newer to town. But my son was also in the last class at Halliwell. We've all got a special kinship there. And, spending time down there with the school activities and scouts in its final days, it was hard not to see the opportunities that the property presented. And also the state that it was in when the school was decommissioned. So, I was really interested in moving forward past the state of decay and turning it into something positive for the community. And, being part of this committee was a way to make a real impact long term. Because like Scott said, I think this is something that, it could be a big difference maker in our community. It could attract people, it could attract business, it could provide, new activities and opportunities for all of our families. So hoping we could do something good.
All right, thank you all for entertaining me for that portion. I appreciate it. And then this way, people can look at this meeting and kind of understand where we're coming from and who we are and what we're hoping to achieve. So with that, I'm going to go into the nomination for chairperson. So are there any nominations for chairperson tonight?
I nominate Jeff Porter for chair.
I second.
I know, right? It's like, got to get on that button. All right, we have a nomination and a second for myself. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? I'm following town council and school committee, so I got to ask 3 times. So any other nominations? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, okay, I will continue. Thank you. Now, next up, nomination for vice chair. Are there any nominations for the vice chair?
I would like to nominate Chris Simpkins as vice chair.
Second.
Second.
All right. Are there any other nominations? Going once, going twice? All right. Motion and a second for Chris to be the vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Scott, was that you that made the motion? You guys were really kind of going back and forth a little bit there. Okay. The two Bobs seconded at the same time. Okay, and then nomination for secretary.
I would like to nominate Scott Savigny for secretary.
I'll second that.
Ooh, you guys were slow on that one. All right, we have a nomination for Scott. Are there any other nominations? Going once, going twice? All right. For Scott for secretary, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. All right, so I'm gonna stop taking notes now.
Yes. Did you want that? Did you technically want that? I'm like,
Somebody had to do it.
No, but you do up great graphs and charts. No, you should have it, because you have it.
Chris is number one. I do some okay PowerPoint stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So for this evening, before we get into the Halliwell Designer RFQ evaluation criteria, I do want to add one item to the agenda for this evening. And according to Open Meetings Act and all that, we are able to add to the agenda. We just cannot make any formal decisions on it. And this was based on Town Council's meeting this past Tuesday about inquiring if our committee would be interested in taking over Scouters Hall, or the Scouters Hall project, as that moves forward. So I'm going to add that as discussion as item number 6, and then we can talk about that. And then, but we'll first just touch on the evaluation forms, or the scoring, rather. So for a lot of these public bid projects, we do have to identify how we score individual applications. As of January 13th, we have had, let me just do this tally quick. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We have had 18 firms pull the documents for the Halliwell master plan. That's really pretty good. A lot of the firms, I recognize the names. So that's also very positive.
Excuse me, Jeff,
Yes.
that's a wonderful reality, but can we assign any reason why we went from, you think it was the incorrect posting, or is it timing? I'm just curious.
Well, because 18 firms have pulled the documents does not necessarily mean that they're going to apply. So, you know, we could still end up with one firm again. So
It's a far cry from where we were.
that's very true. Yep. So there was the correction in the advertisement, and it's, you know, been properly re-advertised. So I think we're in good shape for it. So when we do get the proposals back from, or the qualification packages from whatever respondents we may have, the RFQ broke it down into categories of where we would be scoring them. So you'll see kind of the breakdown there of how each section will earn a certain amount of points. I understand the highly advantageous and highly disadvantageous might be somewhat subjective, but it's also in understanding, you know, if there's a firm that comes before us and they have, you know, 30 years in business, and, you know, they have 3 or 4 principals. They have, 30 people working there. And, their list of services matches what we are looking for, that would obviously put them could potentially put them at a 10 points for that. Where we would start to score 2 points is where we see a brand-new firm that's 3 years old, has 1 principal, maybe have 3 people, and they don't have any relevant work experience to master planning. So it's kind of putting it on that range of 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. And what I plan to do is send out a Google form for everybody, for each applicant that we do receive. I'd send out a Google form to everybody. They'd score them accordingly. Those scores would be taken, put into a matrix, and average out the scores. And we could decide on, first we would probably report back to town council and say, we'd like to interview these firms. Can we move forward and interview these firms? Then go through the interview process.
So, sorry,
Mhm.
who's doing the scoring?
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you submit the application and we score it based upon these answers?
Yep.
What's the deadline?
The deadline is the Tuesday, the 31st. So I would be likely working whoever the interim finance director would be to distribute PDFs. We have asked for hard copies, so we could certainly make those available for people to pick up. I would not expect that we're going to meet that February 3rd. I would want to make sure everybody has a good couple weeks with them to really dive into them. Let me just look at the calendar.
Does the advertisement request?
Yes.
I'm assuming it does.
Yep.
It requests the
All this-
information
yep.
that we're then gonna grade on?
All this information, yep.
And
yeah.
should we not, is it the sentiment that each of us would grade the 15 on our own using the grid and then have a meeting to discuss, or
Yes.
just have a meeting to look at the aggregate scores and discuss? Because some may not have the same level of comfort. They may make a draft grade and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking, but I would like to hear others before I make my final. So it might be beneficial to let everybody do one pass internally to themselves. Then maybe we have a meeting that's just talking and saying, okay, well, that one, this one, that one, this one, how, what, why.
Yeah.
Then you go back and within 2 weeks you submit your final score. So that we don't come here during the conversation and somebody says, well, gee, if I had thought of that, I would have given them a 9 or a 7 or a 6,
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would caution us about is based on the number of applications we might receive. If we receive 15 applications, I may suggest that we just take a draft run through and score them on our own, see what the top 3 or 4 are, and then discuss those top go-getters. Just so then that way we can kind of weed out the ones, so we're not, because that going through 3 or 4, it takes a good chunk of time. So I would say if we get more than that, then potentially we just do a draft run through. And then if there were any, then we talk about those top 3 or 4. And if anybody felt that we were missing somebody, then we could continue talking about that one firm. I might propose that that's how we proceed with that.
I think that's very reasonable. If we have, if the majority of those who poll respond, it would be overwhelming.
Yep.
So we could at least, and then the other question I had is, if we do get multiples, should we kind of think of in our minds a minimum score, or just let the numbers dictate what the minimum scores are?
Usually we would, in an instance like this, typically what happens is the top 3 or 4 get asked to be interviewed. So if there's like a couple ties, then obviously, we would certainly want to interview folks. But I think once we get, it will probably be very evident once we start draft scoring some of these firms, which ones will stand out and which ones may not.
well, you know, I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that was dawned on me is, should we not, or have we established our methodology by which we're going to say to the council for approval that we are going to report back to you, and we will come back with a list of 4 to 5 or 3 to 5 firms. We'll tell you every month,
Mm-hmm.
and you're free to look at everything, but we're going to come to you and say, you asked us to rate them. Did they in fact ask us to rate them, or at this point they've only said, find out who's interested?
This is typically the process that's followed for public bid jobs like this. There's the RFQ that goes out, there's the scoring of the RFQ, and then there's the recommendation of the top firm, and then there's the negotiations that go into that afterwards.
Who usually does the scoring of the RFQs in that process?
It depends on the committee. So I know with the MBRTF, there was an instance where there were 2 members of that committee, the administrator and the finance director that went through those. There's other instances where it's just been a committee like ours that have gone through it. So I wanted everybody to make sure that they had their say for this, this process.
My fear is that you and Bob are probably most qualified to score these, and the rest of us are scoring these, and we misinterpret something,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got the scoring upside down in aggregate. So that's kind of one fear I have when I don't have this expertise, and other than Jeff and Bob, I don't think we do. So that's just a concern.
I think we can kind of take an approach similar to what I've experienced in looking over state grants. Is you score them, everyone submits their scores. Well, first is a kind of a review. So if we have a number of applicants, if we only have 2, it doesn't, you can probably just score those. But if you have 8, 10, 12, 15, it might be worthwhile to first take all of those, look them over, just discuss them openly. We can go back. That way, if anybody has any questions about any of them, anybody's unclear about anything, we can then go do our scoring, submit them to whoever, Jeff or whoever, put them in a chart, can put them up on the screen, and we can all see how we scored. And those aren't the final scores, but then we can go through and discuss, because yes, there could be instances where, given our backgrounds, maybe we're not as familiar, so we scored a different way, and hearing from other people how they scored could kind of trigger something in us and say, okay, this is why I did it, but I see what you're saying, so maybe I'll go back and give us an opportunity after that kind of group review to go back and alter our scores if anything needs to be changed, and then we can have a final submission and be like, okay, so it may take a meeting or 2 to do something like that, depending on the number of firms that apply. Hopefully we get a good number, so it'll take us some time to go through. I'm just wondering, given the point system, would we be scoring if they hit all the marks on number 1, brief history of the firm, they hit all the marks on there, are we scoring 10, 8, 6, or is there room in between? Like, I think this is more of a 7, I think this is more of a 5, or are we scoring based on the numbers that you provided?
So this is where it gets a little tricky. If there was a particular firm that was feeling particularly litigious, we would need this document to say, we scored it according to this document, and we have all our bases covered. And you scored a certain number because this was the out of 100, and these are the reasons why. So it falls very similar to other rating systems that are in Massachusetts for public bid contractors.
I'm glad you clarified, because when it's time to score, we will know now, okay, don't give somebody a 7 or a 5.5, or go with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10,
Yeah.
and score based on that rating system there.
Yeah.
So that sort of gets at a question that I had, but just to clarify, we wanted to do the RFQ process rather than the RFP process because it allowed for some subjectivity. It's not just the cheapest, price that we're going with.
And we're required by law to do it by RFQ process.
Okay. So the score that we come up with, whoever's going to score the highest, that's it's legally binding that we would go with them, is what you're saying.
So there's kind of a two-part step with this. That we get the proposals, score them, pick the top 3 or 4, invite those 3 or 4 to come interview, see what the dynamic is between our group and the architect and engineering team. So that's part 2. That's after we score them, we figure out who the top scoring firms are, we invite them to come meet with us, we discuss with them, kind of pick their brain. We do have to if we have questions, we have to ask them each the same question. If there are follow-up questions, there's obviously follow-up questions for that sort of thing. So that's kind of, this is part 1, and then there's part 2.
So the score is not the end-all, be-all. It's to help us narrow down who we want to interview.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we got to go to the word qualification, that's all this is.
Yep.
So
Pre-qualifying only.
if we get only 3 applications, do we skip this and just go right to the interview?
We could,
Well, I don't think.
but I'd want to make sure that
I
we.
think you should do it no
You still
matter
score?
what, because you could have somebody who just took a flyer and said, well, let me throw our name out there and see if we can land this one. I think you need to pre-qualify, even if you have 1 at this point. If we only get the 1 out of the 12 or 18.
Yep.
You still need this process because we have the right to say, well, no, all due respect, you're the one, but you don't meet our criteria.
Yeah. And I mean, if we want, the reason why I made this as a draft, if we wanted to alter this a little bit, so then that way we do have that's why I have draft right at the top. If we do want to alter this in some way, add some language for us that will say, firms must score an 85 or above to be considered to be qualified for this project.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
We can certainly say that, and then we can give them this document and say, here's our document of how we scored things, and and go from there.
Well, I think, again, it's a great idea. The only issue would be if it is in fact a legal requirement, if we can have an internal number. If we then need to declare it, then so be it. If we have to declare it, I'm afraid it would tie our hands. If it can remain internal, then it's beneficial to us. But if we have to go out and say 85 or 72 is our minimum, now we're needlessly tying our hands.
Yeah.
But if it's internal, then I would be 100%.
Yeah.
So I believe it must be external, or no?
No, not in this case. I would, my experience has always brought me to the top scoring firms, not the bottom scoring firms, or just, what that minimum grade is to be considered. So at this point in the game, I really think whether we have 15 or whether we have 2, we score them. Well, I mean, between however many we have, we score them regardless. And if they're hitting 90 or above, then that checks a good chunk checks a good part of what we're looking for.
Well, if you want to use that logic, you either take each point assigned to the word neutral, add those together, or you take each point assigned to the word advantageous. If you only want the high echelon, then you use advantageous, the total number, and there's your minimum.
That would be, I just did the math, it would be, if we took advantageous, then it would be, if they scored all of that, it would be minimum of 65 points. And I don't know if we want to just go to neutral, I don't know where.
Well, I don't expect to see, frankly, neutral is there for a reason, but I don't see why we would ever click on neutral.
However, do you want neutral?
It seems that one of us, we would each have to decide north or south of neutral. So I would think that if we wanted to use the threshold, we use the total points assigned to advantageous and go with that.
I have a sort of procedural question about number 4, because what we've talked about is scoring firms based on these questions, but we can't score number 4 until we've interviewed references. So is the intention that we're going to be calling references on everybody that applies?
Thank you for bringing that one up.
Okay.
Because I do want to kind of determine what the questions will be asked for whoever's calling these references. It's a pretty standard process. You know, did they perform the work that was outlined in their contract? Were there any pros? Were there any like the similar questions that I asked? You know, how are the firm's performance? You know, and then based on those responses, we could, you know, score accordingly. So at the last town council meeting, I had requested that the council consider hiring an owner's project manager who would basically be doing this for us, given that we have 2 to 3 building projects going forward in town. But given that we don't have an OPM, this was kind of falling into our court a little bit. So those, for number 4, again, it would be someone in this group or some folks in this group calling the references, checking in on them, and asking these questions or more questions, and then seeing how they respond to them. So, again, it's one of those things where we do have to ask the same questions of every reference and kind of get a feel for how they did, how well or not well that potential applicant has done.
But shouldn't we use that for the next phase and not this phase? All we're asking for now is if they declare through answering item 4 that the list of current and past work assignments make them qualified, shouldn't we just take it as on face value and then do the investigation when we whittle the list down to the final?
That very well could be the case, and we could even use that as precursor to our interviews too. If there were a couple firms that were tied and we need a bit of a tiebreaker, one or some of us could call those references and kind of get the lowdown on that applicant to see if they worked well or not too.
I would move that we do that, that we either strike 4 or relocate, assign 4 to the RFP aspect of this process.
Yeah, I would say rescale it and then take 4 out.
Yeah.
And then use 4 as, you know, your top 2 or 3 differentiator, and maybe another scoring system within those questions on 4.
So I mean, the wording that's here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are listed in the RFQ already, so those point systems are already advertised. So we could change that to if they provide 3, they get 20 points. If they provide, you know, more than 3, they get 20 points. If they provide 3, they get 12 points, and if they provide less than 3, they get 1 point.
Well,
Wait a minute, I'm confused. If they, just because they provide 3 references, doesn't mean that they should get 20 points. If we call them and their references are bad, and it's,
I think what we're saying is just this round, they'll just provide them.
okay.
And then once we narrow it down based upon the initial scoring, round 2, we then call and rescore.
Okay, sorry.
What if we not focus so much on the references and contacting them, but it says list current and past work assignments similar in nature that the firm is directly contacted to. So if they can come to us in their packet and say, we've worked on this center, this open space, that open space, then at least we have a basis of knowledge. Whereas if they say, well, most of our experience is in commercial buildings, then maybe that's not for us. If a lot of it is in libraries and other public spaces, then, you know, we can evaluate it that way rather than checking on their references.
I think relevance is sort of contained in the 3rd scoring point there, outlining similar project experiences. So that's, you know, that's sort of what you're getting at.
With number 4, it's more that they are staying current with public designs. Because when it goes to number 3, you know, oh, I could have done a master plan 20 years ago, you're kind of going to be a little rusty if you're going to be doing it now.
Yeah, but why didn't we assign the breakdown to 4 that we assigned to everything else?
We certainly could, then, if that's how we want to move forward with that.
Well, I would think it would make sense, because if they list only 2 relevant projects and 3 highway jobs, then, you know, that's clearly disadvantageous.
Yep.
That gives us a little bit of that subjectivity in how we evaluate that.
And it's being consistent, because every other item has tier.
Sure. So I could break that down to 20, 15, 10, 5, and 0.
The other thing I'm wondering is, should we not move item 5 to make it item 2? Only because of the relevance. It may not matter, but, you know, it'd be nice to know right off the bat that we're doing our review if this company is at its maximum capacity or not.
Yeah, this is just a list, so whatever the order they decide to put it in, that's what it's gonna be.
That's all.
Okay, so I'll make that adjustment to number 4 based on the current and past work assignments, rather than inferring that we're gonna be calling references right off the bat. Okay.
I would move that we accept with the revisions made, unless members have any other points to add.
I just got one question. Project load, current and projected in excess of 1.5 million. That's not their fee, that's the project they're working on.
That's their
Total
project
project.
cost, so construction cost
Okay.
and their fees.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept with amendments. Got a second from Chris. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So, that's the number of projects over 1.5 million, current and projected?
Total to add up.
That's in their funnel?
Yes.
Okay.
So if they have project,
Projects in relation to their capacity, right?
yeah, if they have project A and that's $2 million, if that, we want to know about it. If they have project B and that's a $20,000 job, then we don't need to know about that.
Right.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So our added discussion for Scouters Hall. I don't know if any of you've watched or heard about the council meeting on Tuesday night, but, yes.
Did you vote on that?
Did I say all in favor? I thought I said all in favor.
You did, we said aye.
Yeah, we did.
No?
Aye.
Thanks for keeping us honest, Chris. CJ? The camera's still on? Okay, just one check. Okay, perfect. All right. So if you hadn't caught the town council meeting discussion on Tuesday, Council President Alves and Vice President Ogier had put on the agenda for having the Halliwell Review Committee oversee the potential Scouters Hall project, which was awarded the $4 million grant from the latest federal budget that has recently passed. Money's not in our wallet yet, but it will be distributed through, the administrator said HUD. So Housing and Urban Development will be distributing those funds to the town when they do come. So there was discussion on it. There was very complimentary towards our board, that we have been very active. We kind of have our finger on the pulse of what's needed for a community center. So I didn't make any promises Tuesday night. I said I would discuss it with everybody tonight because I did want to get a feel for what everybody's thought was on that. I do think we are uniquely positioned because we have been going after the community center aspect, the term that I'm going to say that we coined when we were doing our presentations to council as the multi-generational center. While it will not be the big project that we're looking at Halliwell, I think we are certainly set to understand the programming of what's needed down there. And then when we finally do get get things going down at the Halliwell property, we can certainly adjust our programming for removing maybe certain aspects of what might be down at Scouters Hall. I think we have also proved that we are still very much here to listen by inviting Mrs. Tebow here to advocate for the seniors. She has my email. She's not afraid to email me. She also has my number, and she hasn't called me for a while, but that's all right. And I think it would probably behoove us to say, extend the invitation to her if this committee decides to move forward with overseeing Scouters Hall.
Well, that, I mean, I read it. It's a very broad, open-ended, quote, invitation. Other than the fact that the enabling motion would have to be revised, which is simple, but are we just being used as the vehicle because we exist? And this very document that we just approved could be used again in next week if you wanted to solicit design services for that building. And everything we're talking about for the last 20 minutes is exactly what some group of people will do when that 4 million hits the bank. Knowing full well that 4 million is a paltry sum, I hate to break the reality, but you're not gonna do a whole heck of a lot with 4 million. And or do we also have a charge, a very defined charge by which the funds were solicited, therefore this is what you're going to build, not spend 8 months assessing and reviewing and asking and listening. I mean, is this thing ready to go? The money was earmarked for a specific purpose?
I understand that the money was earmarked for some renovations at Scouters Hall for a multi-generational space. That money has been earmarked. The council's invitation was to inquire if this committee was interested in continuing with our community center work. I was kind of hoping that they would be here tonight. Both Council President Alves and Vice President Osher would be here to speak to it a little bit more this evening. So I am just purely at this point the messenger from what I heard them say Tuesday night.
Well, I mean, I think you can look at it with whatever colored or type of hat you want to put or glasses. You could call it a dry run, give us, this committee, an opportunity to, quote, prove itself again to the public that we have the ability to see a project from beginning to end, and we would learn a lot through the process of a much smaller project. So you can look at it that way. You can look at the obvious also angle that we don't have a heck of a lot to do if we get the RFPs and nobody wants to spend the money for design, we're dead in the water. So I give the council credit, they're thinking outside the box. I would be hesitant unless we knew that 4 million, if they say 4 million, you build whatever you can build for 4 million, we're not giving you a penny more. And we're not gonna be yo-yos up and down. Well, maybe yes, maybe no, we might do this, we might not do that. If this is gonna be expedited, and we're gonna go and get architectural firm to do the design and then go through the process, and or if this committee is supposed to take it all the way to turnkey and the cutting of the ribbon, or is it just get the thing moving and the GC will be managed by administrative people. I think if we got a little bit more understanding, again, what hat you want to wear, you know, it would be a good dry run for us, which would give us the ability to say to everybody when the time comes to spend the big money, that we've already proven that we know what we're doing as a unit. So again, you can look at it both ways. I'm more inclined to say yes, but I don't want to be treated like a yo-yo.
I think that potential project, which seems like it's going to happen, and this project are, you know, inextricably linked. When I first heard about the Scouters Hall money, my first thought was, well, how does this impact what we're doing? Because it's obviously, there's, you know, look at the Venn diagram. There's a big overlap between what we've been working towards and what this $4 million allows for at Scouters Hall. And I will say that I actually saw the application for this money some time ago, and a lot of the work that we did was actually used to help acquire it. So like the survey was used as justification for the need at Scouters Hall and for our town needs. So, you know, I think to your point about, you know, is this money being earmarked for a certain purpose? Yes, it's being earmarked for the purpose that we've been working towards. It's just a smaller slice of it at a different building. So I think that this committee is positioned to, you know, help move this forward. You know, I watched the council meeting, and there was some concern about, you know, senior representation if this committee was to take it on. And I will say there's still 2 open seats, so it's a good opportunity for, well, there's Bob too, you point to him. I wasn't gonna call him out, but thanks, Jeff. You know, so there's the opportunity for the council to appoint a couple additional members to this committee. You know, for that, with that specific purpose in mind. And, you know, my other sense from watching that meeting was that the council is not convinced there will be money to move the Halliwell stuff forward anytime soon, which is, you know, equally frustrating and disappointing, but we're gonna stay positive and try and make it happen. But if it doesn't, then this project, again, allows us to move things forward, some small aspect of what we've been working towards. It looks a little bit different than what we expected, but, you know, we're still offering the community something new, and it gives us a chance to prove ourselves, like you said.
The only concern I have is, it's fine, I have no problem with our committee being involved. We've proven ourselves in the development that we've done for the last year and a half, 2 years. My concern is, obviously, we're gonna need representation from the seniors, like a Linda Tebow. The Scouts are gonna want representation. Park and Rec is gonna want representation, and my question is, how big is this committee gonna become? That's a concern, that we work very well as 7 or 8, 9 members, but it could potentially be a 15 or 16 member committee by the time everybody who's got a vested interest in that project is heard by the council and they're accepted to be on. So I just think we should be prepared for that. I think we should explain, and I wish the council was here, explain to them that we feel, you know, personally, I'd love to be on that. I was very involved with Scouts for many, many years. It was myself and John Gilmore who put the addition on to Scouters Hall. We know about the wetlands in the back. There's a lot of pros and cons as to how big that building can be, and I think it's gonna have to be demolished and a 2-story building put up. But I think we need to know from the council how big they think this committee could be. Because if you get much beyond 9, 10 people, it's gonna be difficult to function.
Well,
I did echo those concerns. Tuesday night, I said, you know, 5-member board is great, 9-member board is great. Once you start getting outside of 9, it's gonna be very difficult. But then I did bring to their attention that we have had joint meetings. We've had outreach to Parks and Rec, the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, the library, the meeting that we had when we had the art and the Arts Committee as well. So while we understand that, you know, we need to have representation from those associated boards and groups, there's nothing stopping them or us from having a joint meeting with Parks and Rec to understand the needs for them to be down at Pacheco and Scouters Hall. There's no reason why we can't have a joint meeting with the planning board to understand that Tom Kravitz, our previous town planner, put together an application to widen the drive down in the entrance so that it would become a more safe place for kids coming in and out and parents going in and out. That's the whole reason why we acquired that parcel next to the two mercantile buildings. So, while I understand the concern of representation, I think we have proven ourselves that we, again, always have we always have room at the table for folks to come and speak their mind, let us know their thoughts. While it may not be always fully taken advantage of, we extend the invites. They have representation here to you know, they could discuss it at their own meetings. It's not to say that we can't go to them either, you know. We can certainly select a handful of us to go to meetings if some of us aren't able to go to it, so.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, and this is where I'm a little bit not confused, but I need clarity. Is the intent of the council to turn this committee into the building committee for the Scouters Hall upgrades? Or is it to be another review committee? Because if we go back 2 years and clean the slate and start all over again, we're wasting a colossal amount of time. We already know what we know. The money was solicited for a given purpose, so therefore the grantors of the money are under the expectation that you're going to do something within the boundaries of what you already said. So we don't have to go through 25 exhaustive meetings with, well, I would like this, and he would like that, and she would like this. We already have. So the real question in my mind is, are you asking us, town council, to become the construction or the building committee for the upgrades? And if you are, is our job to do exactly what we just did? Get RFQs, get RFPs, make recommendation to contract to architect A or B, and then let them take the document that was used to solicit the funds and engage our community with us to say, okay, room number 3 is going to be this. The second floor is going to be that. If we start way back in the beginning and let everybody come in here and say, well, I'd like this, I'd like that, that's exhaustive and it's never going to happen. So I think the burden, if the committee, since we can't vote, if you get the tone and temperament that we are willing to read a motion that would be given by the town council to this committee to say, this is what we're asking you to do specifically, not this broad-based, talk to this one, talk to that one, make everybody happy. And what is the monetary commitment by the town? Is it you build whatever you can build for $4 million and we're not going to give you a penny more? Or it's just so important that that's the base and we're going to go from there? I personally would need to, because we've been, yeah.
I don't think
We need more direction if we're going to then, because I think we're all right in saying, we all can read the writing on the wall. When the town makes it clear that they don't have any intentions of budgeting to even take down the buildings, then I don't think they're gonna jump at the chance to spend $400,000 in design. So we know that a lot of this is an exercise in futility, but it's the accumulation of all of our work and we're obligated to do it. So we're kind of betwixt and between. If we say no, we're probably not going to exist in name only. But if we say yes, I think we need clear direction so that we're not a ship searching for the wind to blow us in a direction.
The way I understood the conversation from council was that our role would evolve to be similar to that of the Municipal Building Review Task Force. That is how I understood it. I know the administrator was going to was thinking of coming down to join us tonight, but again, alas. But that was my understanding of the discussion that was had. And then, you know, the next council meeting isn't until we can if we need to make a motion tonight, or if we need to make a motion based on this topic, we can meet before the next council meeting. That would be the February 3rd, I believe. 2nd, sorry. It would be a 10-minute meeting, but we still can have that meeting to make that motion. Otherwise, I could certainly request that we be put on the agenda for the town council meeting on the 6th, and then we show up, voice our concerns, have the discussion with town council right there. So, you know, that could be one of two ways that we could approach this.
Well, I wonder, the topic that was brought up at the council meeting felt very embryonic at that point. Like, I don't think council president and Councilman Osler were bringing it forward as a discussion. So I don't think and it seemed like the town administrator kind of had his own ideas of who should guide this project with senior representation, scout representation, which I wholeheartedly agree with. That's Scouters Hall, and you need some kind of scout representation. So I do agree that if we were to, before we make a decision on any of this, we need to have clarity of what did they want out of the body for this project. They don't have the money in hand yet. It's not in a bank account. So I think it was a preliminary conversation, so I think we are right in having a preliminary conversation ourselves. I don't think we're in a position to take any action or plan any action at this point, because it was talked about on Monday night, and who knows where it will go from there. I do agree, I think we're positioned to handle it as scout parents, as representative of the senior community. I think we all kind of have a background that can be valuable in the guiding of that project, in addition to hearing from all those groups, the seniors, meeting with the scouts, meeting with Parks and Rec. As we've all discussed, we don't close any door. So while our backgrounds in town put us in a certain position, then we definitely can hear from those groups. But I would be interested, as with Bob, to see what parameters do the council want to put on us to guide that project. Because it seems like that is a project that they know they are getting the money for it, but they don't have it yet, and it's kind of putting us in the back seat. So I think we see where they go from here with it, and then their action will determine our action. But in the preliminary stages, I would be for it if they wanted to. They expressed a great amount of confidence in us and were very complimentary to us, and I appreciate that. They recognized, I think, our value, which was important, and it was nice to hear. So I just like to hear more and flesh that idea out a little more. It felt very basic at that point, so maybe they'll take it on an agenda item going forward and talk about it more.
Yeah, Jeff, you said evolve to that building committee, right? So I think, to your point around clarity, where is that evolution point starting from? Yep. I don't think any of us want to go back to do this for.
But I also think that, to your latter point, this idea of, I say, put the burden on the council. It was their idea. Let them do their internal work to flush it out and clarify. We don't need to go and meet with them and let them tell us, this was your idea. Let the town council say to us, this is what we are thinking. It's in writing. It's not ambiguous. Now we can read it, and then we could go and have a meeting and say, okay, council members, engage on this and that. Because The solicitation of the money was based on a preconception of what the project will be. Now, yeah, we'll fine tune it as to whomever, if it's us, how much involvement each of those sub-tiers has, but the conceptual idea has already been hatched. Otherwise, you never would have gotten the money. But I say, put the burden on the council. Do your homework, tell us what you want us to do, then we can digest it, then we can have a meeting. And I don't think we need to have a meeting to vote. I think to play within the lines of the law, I think the chair, hearing the conversation and the opinions of the majority of the members, has enough information to say to the council that the committee appears to be willing to take the next step with you on this, which is give us something formal that we can actually review and discuss with you, and then we can go from there.
Well, I think that's one of the things that a few counselors brought up is, has anybody talked to the Halliwell committee? Is anybody interested, right? So I think what they're looking for is to take the initial temperature. So what we can say to them, and you know, we still have to hear from a couple people, but you know, given the right parameters of the project, it might be something that we're interested in, you know, and we can start there and let them outline what those parameters are.
Yeah, and they would do that with revising our resolution. It would be as simple as that. If they wanted to, you know, I can report back to them. I can report back to them via email and say, you know, we talked about this tonight. This was the general feel. Let them know. So then that way, if they want to get something on the agenda to vote on, to amending our resolution, and then they can tell us right then and there, great.
So can I ask a question? So we have a municipal buildings task force, right? Was there any consideration for that project to go under their purview? Because I feel like this is gonna become,
There was one mention of the MBRTF. I have a feeling that they are going to, my impression that I got from speaking with their chairman, Mr. Nordstrom, that they are going to be deep in the weeds of the police station renovations when that gets moving. He was saying that those meetings are gonna start becoming more frequent, and when he was reporting back to the council. So I think, that we have two very talented groups in town. I think that would start to overburden them, and having the Scouters Hall project would likely detract from their work at the police station.
I think the distinction is probably, you know, municipal services versus community-facing needs. And, you know, the Halliwell Review Committee might become more of a community needs review committee, or whatever, you know, they want to title it. But, so that would sort of encompass those two projects and create that clear delineation between what we're doing and what they're focused on.
I think if you look at it, that space over there is not very large, given the wetlands back there, the parking is not very big. As Jeff has mentioned and Bob has mentioned, the amount of money that's coming in, the $4 million, is not going to be stretched very far. So I think while it takes, if they want to build something over there that will, they're calling it a senior center, but that will accommodate senior programming, while it takes that off of what could be at Halliwell, there's still a large amount of things that can go on over there. We can still, if we want to, look to put some kind of structure over there that can have a gymnasium, have multi-purpose rooms, because you do have Northman hoops. Multi-purpose rooms could be used by a large number of youth groups and Parks and Recreation to have different programming and meetings. So that space there will take a component of what we were looking at accommodating at Halliwell, but there's still a lot more that can be accommodated over there. So the argument can be made that it could be a natural progression if they give us a clear sense of purpose and what our role would be. You get that out of the way, and then we can focus on accommodating other groups, other activities over at Halliwell. So I don't think I think it becomes the #1 priority for the town because the money is readily available, and maybe it slows us down a little bit, maybe slows our momentum down a little bit, but I still see some kind of multi-purpose community structure going there to accent what would go on outside with any kind of play structure, walking trails, whatever courts you want to put there, basketball, baseball, pickleball, whatever may be there, there's still a lot of potential at that space, even though the seniors will be located in the Scouters area.
Yeah, we have a lot to work with, you know, and as everybody said tonight, Scouters and adding on to Scouters is just a very small piece of the puzzle of what we've been working on. If we have to, I'm gonna change my analogy. Got a lot of Lego bricks to be working with, okay? I know, right? So, all we're doing is taking one or two bricks out of this set, the Halliwell set, and we're adding it on to the Scouters set
With a budget and a plan.
with a budget and a plan. We still have all the bricks. We're still gonna be able to, you know, place them. But again, we've been very well positioned to have more than one Lego set.
Well, it seemed that when this came out, the primary objective was to meet what was perceived as the immediate need of the seniors.
Mhm.
That's what I haven't been involved other than what I've read. So that, as you say, is multiple bricks from the Halliwell process. But it also indicates that, and this is a compelling question, and this is why we need to see the documentation, whether that 4 million must only be expended at that address for that specific purpose of the grant. So you build to fit that need, and if all you're doing, quote, is adding a few rooms, yeah, 4 million will go and get you some really nice rooms. The only thing I would suggest, though, to Jeff, to Chair, is I would ask that when you send your email, giving them the tone and the temperament, that they not vote to amend our charter, if you will, that they first give us a memorandum that says this is what we would like to do. Do you agree? Let's engage, have a meeting, then we will pass the motion. And if they say, well, no, we don't agree with anything you're saying, this is what we're gonna do, because in fairness to members, if they just give it to us and say, here's the edict, we just redefined your job, you know, we have the right to say, well, that's not what I signed for when you asked me if I wanted to serve again. So I would strongly suggest that they give us in writing what they would like us to do. Once we acquiesce and say yes or no, then they change the legislation or the enabling motion.
I'm curious, Laura, you haven't really said anything on this. What's your feeling?
I just feel like it's just an extension of what we've already done. I don't think it's a negative in any sort of way. I am listening to your concerns and the fine print and the details, but I feel like we've already gathered the information. We're just moving it around a little bit. So I still think it encompasses our main charter, what we're supposed to be doing.
I think it makes sense, given all the work we've done, all the input we've gotten. I feel like in reality, we kind of been given a gift, right? We got a $4 million gift. Basically, we're taking that project and moving it over there, assuming because they want us to oversee it. My fear is that long-term, this is a short-term win, and by moving those few bricks, the plan for what could have been over there falls apart because of the perception as, well, you
But-
kind of got it over here.
Those bricks are moving regardless of whether or not we're gonna help move them.
No, I agree, I agree. And maybe that is a long-term gift. I just kind of thinking it, how does that impact, do people say well, maybe the best thing now is to just sit on that land for now, like nobody's making any more land.
No, I think there's a high probability that could occur, and this is our only vehicle to actually achieve something.
But we actually brought up some really, really good points about moving things around. We had discussed also the possibility of taking the library, and they needed a bigger space. So maybe we're just doing the same thing, but moving your Lego pieces in different sets. We're just moving the town around a little bit. So it's still conceptually the same thing, but it can be in different locations. And we maybe need to reserve that, you know, that's still
I think,
out there.
I think there's, just though for the benefit of the seniors, like, we should, right? They don't have dedicated space. Like, you know, they've come and You know, Linda said she wants to see it in her lifetime.
They're using it now. They're using Scouts now, the seniors are using Scouts now.
Right, but I think they feel as though they're welcome into Scouters Hall, not in,
It was through our research and our data collection that that voice, I know that Linda and everybody else were very evident about it before, but that's when it became really big, that we have to have these kind of services. So, being at the same time as COVID hit at the same time, but it rose to top of the food chain, right?
Yeah.
What I see Scouters as too, is an interest starter. We can be able to have the ability to say, well, look at what we've achieved. We have all this other stuff that we can achieve. So let's look at the big picture at how great these community spaces could be. Here's our example at Scouters. We've done a great job there. I'm not going to make any promises about being on budget and on time because contractor with construction lately and lead times, nothing is on time. But I mean, we could have that as an example of, okay, we still have a need to have more community space. We've started at Scouters. We've proven ourselves, as Robert has said. Now let's go for the big one. Let's go after it. Let's get this done. So North Smithfield not only has a Scouters Hall that has a great addition that serves the seniors, but let's get something that's even greater that serves the entire community now. So it's a starting point to build that interest.
I have a fear that, and this is a completely unknown, how successful that property is or isn't, could make me reframe my thinking of Halliwell. Where like, if that's wildly successful, I'm like, maybe we don't need something that big. And would that be the right, it would make me rethink that. So,
My thought process is that if we could put something there, it's gonna cost less money, maybe maybe the way that we're thinking about it, all the services would still be doing it, but we're still reserving this enormous space that we have for potentially something that's coming down.
I think there's one thing to remember. It's called Scouters Hall. So while they used our information and were able to get money to build a senior center, it is a scout building first and foremost. And it needs to remain a scout building first and foremost. And the seniors can, you know, I'm assuming most of their activity will be during the day, and there won't be much overlap at night, but between PAC 7, between 438, between 1139, there's a large amount of scouts and scout parents that rely on that building, and it needs to be first and foremost a scout building. Can accommodate seniors as well, and that's why they get the money, but I don't think it can be branched off into a multi-use building. You need to get municipal court out of there. That needs to be out of there because it interrupts scouting over there, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that it's a scout building first, and while we all talk seniors, I think right there at 1A and 1B, it's seniors and scouts.
And the other thing is this, the Scouts use that garage to house their trailer and all that equipment. And if anything, that should be bigger, and they have to maintain that, because that's what the Scouts have used that building for.
I believe right now the trailer is housed elsewhere because there is no room at Scouters to.
Well, the 1139 is in this parking lot.
We used to keep it, when I was involved, 1139, we used to keep it in the garage.
Yeah.
And now the garage is over there, and we can't keep it.
I've spent a lot of time in that garage. By the way, this committee is uniquely positioned to represent the interests of scouts, given your history. I've been a scout leader for 7 years. My wife helped to lead PAC 7. I'm a leader in 1139 now, Scott as well. And we have a deep, understanding of the history of the building. I've seen the original deeds and the transfer of deeds, and there's explicit language in the original deed that says that the building is to be used for scouts. That got lost along the way, but we can't lose sight of it.
Transfer from the library to the town.
Yes, exactly.
I researched that also.
Yeah. So, but you're right. I mean, if you go in there now, we've added a new troop to town with 438. The Girl Scouts have consolidated regionally, so all of those nearby towns are now meeting at Scouters Hall under the North Smithfield group. But
It's really, the municipal hall, the municipal court, just has taken away 20% of the, square footage there, and I know because I've done the calculations. So, you know, I think that and with a couple open seats for, you know, additional representation for seniors, I think that this group is really uniquely positioned to help drive this project forward in a smart way. Yeah. Absolutely, and given our work on just the community needs more generally, I think that, you know, we're really positioned to drive this home more than any other group in town potentially is. We just need to make sure that the parameters that we're working in, to Rob's point, are sort of in line and with, you know, the work that we've been doing, and that we're not just going to be spending time spinning our wheels and doing something that we didn't sign up for.
I think we've probably all communicated our positive thoughts, but one thing I think we should keep in mind, getting back to this, when this time comes, if in fact we ever execute anything, which I doubt that we will, but if we do, we're going to need the two design groups to be aware of each other. And this design group, if it is to exist, will have to factor in whatever the final plan for Scouters Hall is, which is playing towards, we may end up finding out that Halliwell is better suited for first phase only exterior recreation, the hiking trails, and maybe some outdoor athletic establishments and the amphitheater, and then the building becomes half of what it was. But to design them separate from each other without having the two design teams, if this one exists, mesh, then the town's being short-sighted, because you do want some harmony, because this almost begs now for a master plan, but nobody wants to spend the money for it.
So I have a question, not being an expert in this world. So, you know, this is realistically years away, right? How much, like doing the scoring and bringing these, could any of this be applied to that project, or would we be starting over?
No, we'd have to re-advertise it as a different project.
Okay.
Budget season is upon us. I do plan, when it comes in front of the planning board, to continue to ask for further funds for us to do a master plan. I have reached out and given my thoughts on how we could start to proceed with our master plan. We're going wildly off topic, but I have been in discussions with the council president, vice president, administrator, finance director, to see how we can move that property with the master plan forward. I'm pulling for us. I'm fighting tooth and nail to get something for this committee so we can move forward. So, it's not to say that we can't take that to oversee Scouters. We could do, it's very easy enough to do them in concert with each other, because then we know what's going on over there. We can inform whoever the design firm is for the master plan to say, all right, take these out, this is going on down there. There could also be contract amendments with different design firms that say, okay, we're gonna start here, but then we're gonna bring you on over for there, you know, or vice versa. So, starts to get very, not as complicated, but it still gets a little bit, there's some complexities to this.
So I think, you know, there's obviously no action to take on this tonight.
Yes.
But I think that the chair could reach out to the council and just let them know that, you know, there's generally a positive sentiment, and we'd like to hear more about how they're thinking about this.
Yeah, so I plan to, my plan after this evening's meeting is I will certainly share the YouTube video of our discussion, send them the link where it comes to that point where we're having this discussion. They don't have to sit through everything else. And then just say, we want to make sure we have a clear sense of purpose. What are you going to amend our resolution to say? What exactly are we going to be doing? We would like to hear that. we're generally in favor of overseeing this, but we just want to make sure that we're clear on what our charge is. You know, with the grant monies, there was certain expectations set, and that's why it was awarded. So that's where we have to work within. We can't start to, you know, alter that, because it has been bought in that whatever it says in the grant, that's what we're gonna do. There's really no leeway to that. At least I don't believe there is.
Do you have a copy of the grant?
I do not, but I'm sure I can get one.
Yeah, I would think that would be very good for us to be able to look at.
Just
If the,
one
sorry.
question. The grant, is it for the seniors, or is it for Scouters
$4
Hall?
million.
For Scouters.
By Cicilline is part of that big 1.7 billion congressional pact. And I don't know what it says. I think it was geared to seniors.
I just looked it up in the press release. It said seniors/multi-generational facility.
Say Scouters?
That it did not.
That's my
That's,
concern.
that's my fear is that,
That's exactly, it's gonna get, that's what we have to make sure it doesn't. But that's my concern.
mine too.
It was nice to hear that the town administrator specifically said that he wanted representation in this project from the scouts, as well as seniors. So it's on his mind. I'm sure I don't want to speak for any council people, but at least he vocalized it, and we are vocalizing it. So I think the more we mention it, then it won't get lost in the shuffle.
Hey, Johnny on the spot. So I mean, there are a number of questions in this grant, but the key thing is there was a short description of the project and why it's needed. And the answer was, which the town submitted, the town is seeking funding to convert existing community space, Scouters Hall, into a full-service senior center with an outdoor seating area and walking paths. The senior center will provide a space where seniors can participate fully in the community, socialize, and receive assistance with services and support. The ultimate plan is to transform Scouters Hall into a multi-generational facility serving all residents from young children to seniors.
How does that go along with what you said, that was keynoted into the deed, that it has to be listed as a Scouters Hall?
Well, that got lost when it was transferred 40 years ago or something. Yeah. It does call out the existing use of Scouters, but it doesn't really mention Scouts in the use going forward. I mean, there's more to this, and I'll share what I have with everyone, so you can all take a look at it, but I'm sure we'll hear more from the council on what the expectation is.
History of Scouters Hall. Your great-grandfather, your grandfather were involved with the development of Scouters Hall, because way back when, in the 50s and 60s, you had a Boy Scout troop at the Catholic Church, and a Boy Scout troop at the Congregation Church. And the Catholics and the Protestants didn't talk, so they couldn't go to each other's churches. And a bunch of people, your grandfather, and people like other people from our church, actually, Halliwell, et cetera, they all got together. There's a big plaque, you guys know it, at Scouters Hall. All those people in town said, enough is enough. This is a building for everybody in the community, regardless of religion. This is Scouters Hall for all Scouts. And they built it. And if we don't remember that and make sure that remains a scouting organization, then it's shame on us.
Keep in mind, too, that the Scouts have just lost their charter at St. John's, so that, yeah.
I didn't know that.
So now they're chartered by Narragansett Council, but, so going to the church for meeting space is not even an option anymore. Yeah, and by the way, this does address funding gaps, so I'll share that with you after.
Thank you, Chris.
The verbiage that was used is exactly what our verbiage was to be. I mean, almost verbatim, it's the exact definition of what we've been developing.
So, I'd like, if it's okay with everybody, unless anybody else has things to add to this. Again, it sounds like we are overwhelmingly in favor, given that so long as our charge is in a particular manner. Mr. Mayo has brought up a great point that we not only have the history of what we've done the past 2 years, but we have Frank, myself, Mr. Mayo, Mr. Najarian, have the long-term history of town. My son is 6th generation North Smithfield, so we've been here for a while. But then we have the fresher perspectives from the three of you as well. So one thing that we always make sure to do is not forget where we've come from. And we are uniquely situated as a committee with our history, our knowledge of what we've done, what's coming before us. So I will relay all of our concerns to the Council President and Vice President, let them know our discussion of this evening. It's a glimmer of hope for us. And we'll continue on with the RFQ as well. So again, thank you for everybody's input this evening. It's certainly been helpful to understand everybody's perspective tonight. So it's very easy to click on YouTube and send them a link of, you wanted to know what we thought of your invitation, feel free to listen in on it if they aren't already. So unless anybody has anything to add.
I'd like to make a motion
Sure, you'd like to make a motion?
to adjourn.
To adjourn, we have a
Second.
motion to adjourn, we have multiple seconds. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, everybody.